Hello, and welcome to Havoc Wargaming, dedicated to bringing you the uncommon. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ron, and today we're going to do a box opening and review of Port Royal by Firelock Games. So let's get started. I don't think I've done any videos for Firelock Games and for Blood and Plunder, but I've been involved as a Blood and Plunder player for some time. I was very impressed when they first came up with their first Kickstarter several years ago. The combination of the rules regarding a small man-per-man skirmish game and ship movement. Most of the skirmish pirate games I was aware of at the time, if they had ships, either the guys were nothing more than counters or the ships were nothing more than scenery. Blood and Plunder did a great job, I thought, of merging those two things together. They also delved more into the history of pirates, and it is a historical world of the Great Age of pirates instead of the more cinematic-based and myth-based. There's a little bit of that, but not nearly as much so as you'll find in most of the other pirate games that were out there. So I was very impressed by those things together. Not to mention that that first Kickstarter had perhaps the best Wargaming Kickstarter video I've ever seen, and just this beautiful piece of scenery, as if I was going to get the scenery when I participated in the Kickstarter. But it was so well done. I've participated in 3 of the Kickstarters that Firelock Games have done. That first one, starting Blood and Plunder, the pirate game in general, and then Beyond the Line, which was sort of the expansion of the pirate game into other areas and different cultures, and in my opinion, fixed some of the balancing issues I was suffering with my army. And then, of course, just now, Port Royal. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Port Royal, or what the game of Port Royal is, well, both. Port Royal is a city in Jamaica. It becomes a pirate haven and capital, and in 1692 it is hit by an earthquake, destroying large portions of the city. This game, obviously inspired by games such as Mordheim or Frostgrave or Zona Alpha, these games where you have a small band going into a relic or ruined area looking for treasures and items. It's basically that sort of game, but unlike the others, it is set into the historic situation of the days following the earthquake and tsunami that ends up hitting Port Royal. So your pirates of various different flavors, or possibly the government troops trying to maintain order. You're possibly Carib Indians or African Maroons seeking retribution. Or in the case of the French, you're just continuing to make war against your present enemy, the British. But you run a company, a small handful of figures, going in and seeking to find what it may and dealing with whatever opponents you may find there. Now, I'm going to start. When I held this up, some of you may have thought it was a board game. It certainly has the look of a board game. This is what they're calling it, Firelock Games, the boxed set. And I've often thought about doing a video on how to get started in miniatures wargaming. If I was to do that now, this game would be on it. Because this box gives you everything you need except maybe plastic glue and paint to get started in playing Port Royal. So everything you need comes inside this box, and you'll see that in a moment as we go through it. I think this is a great trend. I say trend, I mean Games Workshop has been doing something along these lines for a very long time. But the idea to help a new player get involved, you don't see that as much on the historic wargaming side, and I think it's a really good plus. I'm going to talk a little bit before we do it, since we are doing a box opening. Take a look at this box, and I love the artwork on the cover. It's a good quality of cardboard. It's a well-made box. I don't know how important that is to anybody. I mean, I don't generally think of having boxes for wargaming miniature games, but if you are going to reuse the box, it's nice to know that it has the quality to do that with. So now I'm going to open it. I should probably also mention I've already opened this. I'm going to only say that because originally the components within this box were wrapped in cellophane. And I wanted to mention that because that's an extra bit of care they didn't really have to do. But it helps protect these elements as they rattle around in the box while they're on their way to you from wherever you may have ordered it. So I think that was a great little detail as well, so I thought I would mention it. This is the rule book itself. The game, at least the rule book, the measuring things, I believe, are available separately. So you don't have to buy the box set to play. You could get started by just buying what you need, particularly if you're already a Blood and Plunder player, that you already have usable figures. And of course, you could actually use other people's pirate figures too. The advantage of the actual Blood and Plunder figures is they're on 20 mil bases. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Firelock stuff, it all comes on integral bases, affecting the metal castings that were actually part of them. Now I think they're separate glue-on because they've gone to plastic and resin figures. But the metal ones, the bases were integral, were designed to look like the planks of a ship, but they're all 20 millimeter. That becomes important in the game, and they argue in the foreword of this book that it's still necessary in this game because it allows you to put figures in smaller areas. Your terrain doesn't need oversized balconies, or it can have small little nooks and crannies that fit the ruins of the post-earthquake Port Royal, and the figures can still be played within it. Anyway, again, that beautiful artwork there on the cover. Well, I like it. There's a map directly inside of Port Royal as it appears about the time of the earthquake, with a line demarking where areas that would be lost in the earthquake. I don't know yet if that's actually important. You're going to see that I have a poster-sized version of this map as well, and I'm not really sure that there was a reason for that other than just for art. The rule book is well laid out. It is high quality, polished or gloss paper. QRS's printed into the book in the rear. There's also roster sheets for your various companies pre-done. I haven't checked, but I imagine that those are going to be available online. I'm starting at the back because I was actually looking to see if there was an index. So far I'm not finding one. There's a glossary of terms though, both gameplay terms and mechanics. This is just parts of the appendix, so there is no index. There is a pretty well laid out table of contents, however. I prefer when a game has both of those, but some don't have either. So there's an overview. I'm going to read the beginning of this just because I think it really helps set the stage for the game and what they were thinking, because this man is explaining exactly why this game exists, I feel. And yet he wrote this in 1692. I came aboard this ship with design to come for England. We have nothing but shakings of the earth and thunder and lightning and foul weather ever since, and the people being so desperately wicked, it makes me afraid to stay in the place. For that very day this terrible earthquake was, as soon as night came on, a company of lewd rogues, whom they call privateers, fell to breaking open warehouses and houses deserted, to rob and rifle their neighbors whilst the earth trembled under them, and some of the houses fell on them in the act. Those audacious whores that remain still upon the place are as impudent and drunken as ever. Reverend Emmanuel Heath, Anglican Rector of Port Royal, 1692. I don't know this is a fact, but it would not surprise me at all if it was the research for the normal game that brought this paragraph to the attention of the people at Firelock Games, and if that didn't inspire the whole game I'm about to describe. Anyway, so this basically has an overview where it describes Port Royal, its history and its situation in the period. As is common with any of their books, there's these beautiful color pictures of some of their tables. Seem to be using primarily two tables for these, and this is the better of the two. The other one, the terrain isn't as good. I wonder if it wasn't done so that you wouldn't feel scared to think your terrain had to be at this level to play. I don't know if that was a design option or not, but the rest of the other board is much simpler. So there's a section where they give a game overview and they give the different descriptions. They tell you what you need to play, the model and the scales. They talk about the thing about the bases I mentioned. They talk about how their measurements work. They tell you that you can pre-measure. They describe the different game tokens. If you are already a player of any of the Firelock games, and particularly Blood and Plunder, you will recognize the emblems. They're using, while these are using cardboard tokens for the different things, the art on it, the fatigue, they're shaken, the conceal's new, but even the smoke symbol for the reload, the icons are exactly the same as that are on the dice that are used as tokens in Plunder. It's continued with the idea of fortune tokens as well. The game uses D10s, just as does Blood and Plunder, and I think all of the Blood and etc. series. They describe the different ways of using the dice. They do have rules for using them for direction pointers and for percentile dice or D5s. Those are all described there. There's a clever little picture for showing line of sight. I love this image. I don't know if you can see it there. But they've laid out a complicated image with a bunch of figures all with letters and tell you who can see who from different directions. Really useful to see it right from the game's view that you're judging in your own games. The stats are very similar to Blood and Plunder. They've added experience, which is used sort of as a knowledge roll to determine things, no doubt because it is a character-specific game instead of a mob or unit game, the way the other one is. But there's cost, which is just how many points they cost. Experience, I just described. Fight and shoot are both a number/number, meaning the fight save, the fight skill, the fight save, the shoot skill, the shoot save, and then resolve. Those are all right out of the other game. Then special, where the individual skills are listed. They don't come with weapons or special equipment. That has to be purchased separately. That's different than the other game. They explain how to do various tests, either the standard tests, opposed tests to determine how criticals work. A 10 is always a critical success, or 1 is always a critical failure. And then they remind you that you should show sportsmanship, that your inner swashbuckler, piracy, and cutthroating should be on the game table, not amongst the players. The game does go in a one player moves all his guys and the other player moves theirs. I don't like that way of playing as much. There are some reactions that can be made by the reactive player. So it's not like you're sitting there doing nothing. That's sort of the modern meld of the two systems of the old turn. I go with all my guys, you go with all your guys, or the normal, what I would usually say when I say I go, you go, which is I move a guy, you move a guy. I prefer that, but I haven't yet read what these reactions are, but that's a very common compromise made between the two systems. It also looks like initiative changes, like you do an initiative test each turn of the game. So the person who has initiative, the one turn, may not keep it for the whole time. There's fortune points, as the other game. They can give you re-rolls and additional actions, or activate certain character abilities. Determining the first active player start, each player may secretly spend up to 3 fortunes, so you can use your fortune to affect the initiative, but of course you also lose those points when you use them. So list of what those actions are. There's rules for moving civil to the other, but it also includes climbing and jumping. I don't recall that being in Plunder before. But you can see how in a game like this that's going to be more important with uneven terrain and individual characters. There's also conceal. You saw there was a prone for that earlier. That's obviously going to be more important in a game like this. Rally, interact, and charge. There's a section on the game board in the terrain and the different features that terrain can have, including the density of the interior of the terrain. It contains many large elements that can further obscure line of sight. The way you might use for woods or jungles in another game, but here it could just be the amount of ruins in a building. The example they give, in fact, is that. Then come the rules on how to create your companies. This is that simpler terrain I was looking at. It's not specific Port Royal looking. It's standard Mediterranean. So not wrong for the premium. Don't get me, that's wrong. That's not what I mean. But it's not ruins. It's not, and it looks like it's a typical table laid out in a normal wargaming fashion. The characters are in factions, just like the other games, so you don't just pick characters you want individually. You have to decide what are the factions you're going to want to portray. The factions in general, I'll go through those. There are Jamaican pirates, French buccaneers, Spanish guardacosta, Carib raiders, Maroons, Forces of the Crown, the defenders, Dutch capers. That's probably what I'll do. So at present, those are the different bands that are factions you're available to choose from, and you'll recognize that if you what those are from Blood and Plunder. It is most of the major players in the Blood and Plunder set of roles. Then comes a section describing the various skills and weapons. Quite a bit on that. Some scenarios. Let's see. And a section on scenario variations. Roll a d10 or draw a card for Port Royal Aid deck. I didn't get that deck, I don't think. No, I'm surely didn't. You can choose these by cards. That might be more fun. I may get a set of those. But this is for little things that alter and change the scenarios as they're written, which will make it seem more varied. There's the deployment rule. Where are the scenarios? Oh, these are just the scenario rules, not the scenarios. So how to do the deployment, things like that. Campaigns. So there's rules for campaigns. That's something that I think is new. Or, well, there may have been, I think there were campaign rules in Beyond the Line. But there's rules for handling a campaign similar to what those games I mentioned earlier, Mordheim or Frostgrave, where you have end-of-game things where you determine who survives and who doesn't, and lingering injuries and stuff such as that. Kind of necessary for a game like this. And for this, I think it would be really a lot of fun. I mean, that's what really made me purchase this. How to divide monies and infamy. Infamy is the points. It's given as pieces of 8 and money, but it's also given as infamy, and that's how you rate the different groups to compared to each other. Now, this is something interesting. This next section is multiplayer, solo, and cooperative play. So they've, like many of these other games I keep comparing to, they've allowed it to be a normal multiplayer game like Frostgrave. They've created a solo version of it, such as, I guess, I think Rangers of the Shadowlands was originally solo. I may be wrong, it may be cooperative, but that's the other option, is any solo game can be played cooperative just by sharing the different roles. But so there's explanations for how to do that in here, and that's interesting to me. And then how to handle the non-player opposing forces, because this isn't meant to be an opposing force game. More like Frostgrave, say, than Rangers of the Shadow Deep, or like Silver Bayonets, rather than Delvery Afoot. This appendix, first appendix, is how to do standalone games. It's also where the events table are. I don't see scenarios, unless maybe it was in the scenario section and it's just that they're less defined. That was a surprise. All right, so the next thing that's going to come up, these were also wrapped as in individual cellophane, as I was mentioning earlier, to help protect them. The first are cardstock terrain. This is part of what I meant when I said this game comes with everything you need. The cardstock terrain, I haven't assembled it yet, but there's several pieces that fit together with like little tab and slot construction. Looks like you can probably just slide them together and take them back apart again. I'll find out if I'm right about that, but it doesn't look like you have to glue them, which can make storage easier. They look better in person than they did to me on the Kickstarter, so that's not bad. I mean, I paid extra for the STLs because of that. There was a series of STLs for ruined buildings. I haven't printed any of that, so I don't have that to show you. The cardstock buildings are better than I thought they'd be. And what a great way to get started is, again, if I said you're new to this period or to this sort of game or to miniature wargaming at all. The interiors and exteriors are painted. In the middle of all of these is the measuring markers. This one is for movement. There's 2 of them, 1 for each side. Then there's the range modifiers. I don't know enough about the rules to know why there's 2 of those. They both have short, medium, and long, but there's 2 different sticks, and I don't see any initials on them suggesting the difference between them, but it probably has to do with pistols to muskets or something. There's objective markers that are numbered on one side, or one is marked as a smoke pot on the side, but the others, actually it's a smoke pot on both sides, but the others are barrel and box on the other one. I imagine that's for scenarios where you show the top side and the number is revealed when you find out what it is. These, I believe, are the fortune tokens. It looks like, I may have been wrong, you may gain them, there's a lot of them here, so I'm thinking you may gain new ones each turn, unlike the regular game, but I don't know. That just seems like an awful lot of them. In normal Blood and Plunder, you typically only have, the highest you ever have are 3. And then all those other normal tokens are right there. There's directions for putting together the cardstock buildings. There's one more of those. I suspect these are not in their original order the way they came. And remember I said, you get everything you need to start the game. That includes a paper folding game mat. And it's a kind of nice looking one. I mean, I'm not a big fan of these pre-done paper game mats. They tend to, they have crease lines. They tend to start ripping along those crease lines. But I tell you what, if Firelock does a neoprene copy of this mat, or maybe even a fabric one, I'd buy it. I like this. I think that's really, I like the fact it's not green, that it's kind of brownish. I like this mat. I think it's a really good mat. And so that's a nice, I like the fact that they thought to put that in there. This is the map I told you about that I think is probably just for art. A larger, it's not as big as I thought it was, as I implied, but it's basically the same size as the one in the book. But it is that map of the city as it exists prior to the earthquake. I have this little sprue of weapons. Everything on here, there's a couple pistols, daggers, and swords with hands on them, but mostly it's just weapons. And I don't think this comes in the basic box. I think this may have been an add-on for the Kickstarter, but I don't remember. And then there's a bag of miniatures. I don't want to go a whole lot into the plastic miniatures. This is not the first time they've done. I have never done a review of their miniatures. I don't have any of it. Well, I have one plastic miniature. I have a plastic monk that somebody gave me. And apparently, the monk comes in this set. But these are the directions on how to assemble the miniatures. I imagine, yeah. It looks like there's choices of lances, spears, or muskets. There's some changes, but it doesn't look like they're all meant to be completely interchangeable with each other. So it looks like there's 15 figures and I guess 9 casualty figures. I'm not sure how those casualty figures are used yet. I don't know if they mark downed characters in the game or if they're objectives for scenarios or both. But there's a mixture here. There's drums. That's interesting. There's drums here. There's also some scenery items, kegs and things like that. Various hat types. I am probably wrong about numbers. I thought these sprues were going to be 3 copies of the exact same, but they are not. So there's actually, so it looks like it's about 15, 16 figures and 3 corpses. They did plastic figures for Taking the Black. I didn't do Taking the Black. I kind of wish they'd gone the other route. Taking the Black takes the game into the early 18th century, and that's the period that everybody does pirates in. I really wanted them to go the other way and do Elizabethan pirates in Age of Drake. But the boats that came with that are phenomenal. Their plastic boats are phenomenal. The plastic figures, from what I've seen, look good. These ones look the same. I'm not going to, as I say, I only brought the one camera out today, so I can't really easily show you. Well, I can try to use the camera that's in front of me. It just doesn't look as well as my usual detailing camera can go. But here's, you can see this has got a few of corpse figures. There's the monk figure on there. So a few different things available to you. They look pretty clean. They're plastic. I'm sure I think they're normal plastic. So you just use plastic glue on them. You could play them this way. Just glue, well, assemble them and play them. So a newbie wouldn't necessarily have to paint them, though of course the game will look much better with your own handcrafted terrain and your own painted. Oh yeah, there's also a set of dice. The dice are designed, it's important because they borrowed, similar to what Carnivale does. I can't remember what they call it in this game, but the white die is used for determining crits. It doesn't matter if you get 10s or 1s on the black dice, it's the white dice that will determine. So it's kind of the way the Destiny dice in Carnival work, except not as hard, because in Carnival you have to have a 10 on the Destiny dice and still have another success on the other dice. And for the failure, you have to have a 1 on the destiny dice and no other successes. And there's no such rule as far as I saw in this for that. So that's basically it. Looking forward to playing it. I'll try to get some games up here as soon as I can. I've already got suitable figures painted for the game. I mean, I don't really have British. I have a Spanish force and a Dutch force, but some of those are interchangeable, are usable. In fact, some of my Dutch force were originally British sailors, British pirates, so we can make that work. I don't know how long it'll take before I actually paint these up, and I have to work on some of the terrain, but I have some terrain already. And this game can be played on as small as a 2x2 table, so covering it with terrain won't be all that hard. So I'll do what I can to get this up pretty soon. I've made a promise that I would do a Dux Britannorum battle. That is still my plan, but confusion in the real world, in the country in which I live, and heavy workload and confusion at work have made it really difficult for me to get much hobby time in right now. So the painting isn't coming along as I would like, and I need to paint a bunch of Saxons to do that game. But it's coming. I hope you've enjoyed that. I thank you for watching. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, or have your own involvement either with Firelock Games and with Blood and Plunder or with Port and Royal, go ahead and give those comments in the comment section down below. Also, we look at the comment section for any further idea for other content you'd like to see us produce here on Cry Havoc Wargaming. If you've enjoyed the video, I hope you'll hit like, and if you'd like to receive further notifications for videos like this one that may help you determine how to better spend your money or time in your tabletop wargaming hobby, then I hope you hit subscribe and ring our notification bell. You may also want to look at donating some money on our Buy a Coffee account. Anyway, thank you for watching, and until next time, cheers.